When many of us imagine college athletics, we see the bright lights and hear the dedicated chants of loving fans. See the glittering trophies and instant fame. What many of us don't get to see is the silent struggle athletes face behind the scenes as they fight to maintain grades, keep up their social lives, and find the time to sleep at night between grueling hours of practice and training. All the while, the shadow of greatness looms over their shoulders. This 30 Minutes, a movement pushing for young athletes and their well-being, is growing, but there is much work still to be done. In a quiet corner of North Carolina's Piedmont sits Elon University. The mid-sized private school, known as one of the prettiest campuses in the country, is also home to the Phoenix. From football and basketball to volleyball and other sports, athletes at Elon face the same pressures as those playing for larger teams.
It's not like we just come out here and play the sport for fun. A lot of us come and play the sport because we have to, or we play the sport because it's a way out of a life that a lot of people don't want to live. And of course, there's mental health struggles that come with all those things.
Offensive lineman at Elon, John Seaton, practices about 6 hours a day and says his schedule can be grueling.
Certain teams do have those resources and sports psychologists for their sport. Have you had any sort of access to those as a football player?
I'm sure, if you went to your coaches, they could definitely help you out, because our coaches do care about us as people a lot, off the field. But I also feel like on that same side of the coin, they are an athletic coach. They are not meant to deal with these sort of heavy taxing issues. You go to your coach with a problem, you tell them something like that, their response is usually, oh, take the day, you know what I mean?
What Seaton is missing is someone like Sydney Young. She's a mental health clinician for student athletes at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
What positives do you see that this university has put forward for their student athletes?
I love that this university has even created this position. Prior to June, this position didn't exist, and this position was created because of the advocacy of our student athletes. The student athletes came together and said, you know what? We don't have an African-American provider, yet we have a great deal of student athletes who are African-American, and so there is a gap in service here.
Due to scheduling challenges and the ongoing pandemic, we spoke to Young once in person and once over Zoom.
And it wasn't until I personally sought therapy and sought help for the things that I was going through before I said, you know what, I can get behind this.
We don't know what that girl going through, that woman going through. We don't know what people are going through.
More and more athletes on the world stage are coming forward and talking openly about their mental health. This summer, Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka brought the issue to the spotlight. But behind these front lines, student athletes facing a quieter struggle have started following their lead.
How important is it for these young college student athletes to see people like Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, take that extra step and say, I do need this time for myself? How important is that?
Oh, it's crucial, because it has been in those moments that our student athletes have had then the courage to say, well, if these professional athletes can do it, I can do it too.
Many things in the sports world are physical. You have to be fit and you have to constantly improve as a player. But the mind dictates what we want to do in life.
On the U.S. women's soccer team, recently retired Carly Lloyd has previously spoken about mental health and wellness as a co-founder of the Stronger Than You Think initiative.
I look back and I wish that I enjoyed the process a little bit more, enjoyed the journey, kind of was more in the present moment. I think I'm finding that now towards the end of my career.
Young's position at UNC is part of this new movement in sports, but Elon is not quite there yet. All students have access to counselors, but there are no official sports psychologists on staff at the school. On college campuses across the country, student athletes are struggling with depression and anxiety. And in a 2020 study conducted by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, 1 in 10 students reported that they suffer from severe depression that made it difficult to function, quote, constantly or most every day. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when student athletes spent a year staring at empty stands and abandoned stadiums, Young says readjusting has been a huge issue for some of her clients.
As an athlete, you have to think like it's connected to your identity. You, at some point, I'm sure, felt like that was your world. And so when you have to take a step back from that, that takes a toll.
Less than an hour from Elon's campus, Senior Athletic Director at Duke University, Heather Ryan, researched mental health in student athletes during the height of the pandemic.
The appointments and the mental health counselors were completely swamped, and they moved everything to telehealth, which was convenient in terms of time and access, and you could move through quicker. But you also were working with students who, some of them didn't have homes to go to. Some of them didn't have a safe space.
Have you seen anything between older student athletes versus, people who graduated high school under quarantine or whatever it is, and then starting that new chapter and kind of being thrown into college life?
Yeah, I think that there could be a lot to learn between freshmen and seniors. A lot of the seniors that I meet with, there's almost a sense of like loss and grief to what they expected their senior year to look like. And even those that graduated kind of in the midst of this pandemic last year. Whereas our freshmen are coming in and they are kind of accustomed to functioning in a way that's a little bit more isolated. And so the challenges that I'm seeing between freshman students and seniors are a little bit different.
Seton is also dealing with integrating into college life during a pandemic on top of other commitments. In his second year at Elon, he runs a clothing business as he maintains a large TikTok following on top of classes and football.
Next up, we got the dudes who are too tired to speak. Let me tell you, this is me.
Personally, I'm a walk-on, so I'm paying to go here, paying to do all this. And then I still have those commitments that a scholarship player would have, is something that, does take a toll from time to time. It stresses you out and makes you feel like that there's too much on the table. There are a lot of outlets that, if they were utilized properly by institutions, that it could make this process just a little bit easier.
Do you think that's a necessary and maybe more so plausible thing that could change?
In a perfect world, there'd be X amount of sports psychologists for X amount of people. You'd be able to go talk to somebody whenever you need to. You'd be able to get an appointment whenever you could.
Elon is a relatively small university, with just over 7,000 total students compared to 30,000 at UNC and 15,000 at Duke. Elon Athletics denied our requests for comment, but Seton hopes to see the trend spread to smaller schools.
If I could talk to Elon, please just consider getting the staff, because I know a lot of people who have dealt with a lot of mental health issues on a lot of sports teams, that I think there is a team of professionals that are needed.